my humble abode, viewers. I wanted to talk today about Pillars of Eternity 2 and a few of the interesting things they did with the game. I think games rightly get a bad rap for having really boring elements in the writing from an intellectual standpoint. In Pillars of Eternity, both games is a very interesting and good exception to that problem that video games usually have. You can tell that they put a lot of effort into the world building and the writing to really give you a lot of interesting points that can pop out and stick with you. And the first thing I wanted to dive into is the metaphysics, because it becomes a central theme to the game in Pillars of Eternity 2. In 1, we're introduced to the idea of the wheel, which is a naturally occurring cycle that's been tampered with into dysfunction by the Ingwithans and Wana in 2. We find out that in 2 that they've built a machine to harness the souls from the wheel and use the souls of people to power the gods, so that we find out the Ingwithans eventually became gods, and that's who the gods today are. Obviously, the main conflict revolves around this idea of the Ingwithans becoming gods themselves, because one of the gods, Eothas, decides, well, that's kind of bullshit. Guys, we really shouldn't be doing that sort of thing, so I'm gonna go destroy everything. And that really rolls into the interesting ethical aspects. So Eothas is the god of divinity, and if you don't believe me that he's the god of divinity because they don't say it, then there's a few interesting fables you should take a look at, religious texts that, highlight light and rebirth as being the central core divine aspects of a divine being. And then you'll believe me that a god of divinity Eothas is. He's interested in the agency of these younger races who now wander Aora, the world of Pillars of Eternity. And it's interesting because the Ingwithans, obviously their race at this point is gone. All that's left of them are relics and the things that haven't deteriorated to dust yet. Aside from the gods, of course. Now, the gods, they aren't about that life. They enjoy being gods. They enjoy having power and doing their pretty much 24/7 treachery. It seems like that's the whole story of 1 was, hey, let's be a couple of treacherous gods. But the interesting thing is that Eothas, his motivations aren't Kantian. And while, if you're familiar with the Immanuel Kant, I think most people are. Most people have to take like a 101 philosophy class at some point in their life. And you're gonna find out about Kant and the universal maxims. But Eothas, he's not interested in the value of the action he's doing. He doesn't really give a shit if it's a cool thing for him to break the device or not. If he should do it every time. He just wants to do it now because he thinks it's bullshit that all the younger races don't get a say in it. And that's actually a lot like Hannah Arendt's political philosophy, which is considering the collective conscience of people, including as many perspectives as humanly possible. But what about this person of this background? What are their views on this? And Eothas, he subtly hints he has done this as the god of redemption. It's his job to be in tune with what the people think, believe, feel, etc. He feels that it would be better off if the younger races had their own agency, that the deities who live now couldn't constantly interfere with their lives. And so he sets off to destroy the machine, which is the driving force of Pillars of Eternity 2. One of the more interesting aspects of this is because the machine has deteriorated the metaphysics of the world, all the souls who go into the abyss won't be able to come out, and apparently there's also a limit to this soul abyss. So souls just end up getting lost forever at some point. But either way, it presents serious problems, the destruction of the device, because the cycle now depends on it to exist. And so it's up to the player to decide, is Eothas right? Does the agency of the younger races matter more than this cycle of rebirth? Or is this cycle of rebirth so important that these just shitty people with the powers of gods should get to decide everything about our lives, and everyone from now on just has to hope the gods don't give a fuck enough about them to fuck up their lives? And all of this ties into making a good sequel, because an important part of making a good sequel is taking something that you've already set up and expanding upon it. The way that Aothas is established as being the bonus dungeon in Pillars of Eternity is a really cool lead-in to Deadfire, where, oh, now Eos has woken up, he's destroyed all your shit, he has basically killed everyone, and now he's walking that way. What are you gonna do about it, Sonny? It's just absolutely the perfect way to make a sequel. You don't even have to ask the player to suspend belief, and that is just a powerful way to capture your players right out the gate. In executing this idea, they decided they wanted to set it in a Caribbean-like island chain, which was really cool. I enjoyed a lot of the elements they added, like this almost storybook combat elements with the ships were really cool. One problem I found, though, was that the colonialism didn't make sense. It seems to me that the writers were unfamiliar with colonialism as an academic concept, because there are at least 2 types of colonialism in play in the game. The first is the type that they try to tell you is happening. If you listen to the Juana, some of the Juana I should say, but the problem is the writers are trying to present it as a kind of Spanish colonialism. But it's clear to me that these writers aren't very familiar with Spanish colonialism, and so they're instead substituting English colonialism, which is something any American-born citizen is going to have a lot of experience with. And there's a huge, huge difference between these 2 colonialisms. English colonialism is resource-focused, isolationist, and a gradual exploitation of the native population. Now, when I say resource-focused, I don't mean that they want the silver, they want your gold. They'll take it if it's there, but in North America, that wasn't really there. The reason that the English were there is because North America had wood. Island countries tend not to have wood, so if you can go somewhere else and get wood, that's pretty fucking good. The focus of the English colonists was to just work the land, use the natural resources available to their settlements. And when I say isolationist, I don't mean they were just huddled up and they weren't trying to do anyone any harm. I mean, their focus was keeping to themselves and using the resources that they had available to them to turn a profit. And that leads into why it was a gradual exploitation. Manifest Destiny is an idea that's not even 200 years old. Well, the ideas that lead into it have been around for a long time, but if we're talking about the Manifest Destiny that becomes characterized mid-1850s, that's a long time after English colonists arrived in North America. Each generation of settlers is going to just take a little bit from the native population. They have what they want already, and at some point, they're going to want a little more. They're going to take that little more, and they're going to continue leaving the native population to their devices. It's because the trade network is actually very beneficial to the English colonists. What they want to do is establish trade, establish profits, get the resources that they need from these native inland populations, and they want to ship them back to Britain because that's how they make their money. The reason that this is distinctly different from Spanish colonialism, the Spanish colonialism is very violent and abrupt. It took about 10 generations for native populations to be eradicated from North America, the United States territories. It took 3 years for the Aztec Empire to be destroyed by the Spanish. Another aspect is that Spanish colonialism has a distinct chauvinism about it. For the conquistadors, the Spanish way of life was the only way of life. If you didn't live like a Spaniard, you weren't a Spaniard. They needed their goods imported from the old world to the new world as much as they needed wealth extracted from the new world. The focus of Spanish colonialism was wealth gain. People would come from Spain, usually low-level lords, low-level nobles. They would make a fortune pillaging the native population, and they would take it all back to Spain with them. A very different model from the resource-oriented English colonialism. As it evolved, they realized that cane sugar was a really good crop, and so then slavery started happening. But that's a whole nother discussion. The reason that native exploitation was so abrupt was that Spanish colonialism had a cyclical nature. It was entirely about 2 sects going into the New World to do 2 different things, and these 2 different things fed off of each other. The religious sect wanted to proselytize and convert because that is the end goal of Spanish Catholicism. we need to get everyone converted because then it's the end times, Jesus comes back, and everybody's good. So we're going to proselytize. When they proselytized, well, the natives would understandably be resistant to those new ideas. Then the conquistadors would invade, loot them, take their stuff. Then the remaining population would be converted or exterminated, depending on whether or not they accepted Christianity. And this would cause their territories to expand as they pushed out populations, which caused a new wave of proselytizing outside the territories, which would then lead to further invasions, further looting, and further conversions. You can see how this cycle can quickly repeat itself and propagate across the Caribbeans, Mexico, South America, into North America. And so these two different kinds of colonialism are very distinct things, and if you want to show colonialism in your game, that's great, do it. But don't try to say that you have one kind of colonialism whenever you very clearly have another kind of colonialism. And what I mean by that is if you walk around, or I guess if you sail around the Deadfire Islands, you'll find these colonial establishments. And if you investigate, you'll find that they are more like the English colonialism I've described. They have their reasons for being here. They're not just here to take everyone's shit, convert everyone to a religion, and make slaves out of them so that they can get money off cane sugar. No, they are here for certain resources. They want to keep everything status quo-ish. They want to make trade agreements with the local populations. Trade agreements are good for business. They're trying to stop pirates because pirates are pretty bad for all populations, except for the pirates. They have a distinct interest in the region that doesn't strike me as being explicitly exploitative. The kind of exploitation that's going to happen in this scenario is going to be gradual. That's why I think that the writers were not up to speed on what it means to have colonialism in your game. And I got a lot of mixed messages between the way that colonialism was portrayed versus how the characters wanted me to see it. That's all I've got to talk about today. If you liked the video, go ahead and leave a comment, subscribe. We have a Patreon if you want to support us that way. That helps us get more content out. Do let me know in the comments if you liked this kind of video, because I'll be doing more of them if people actually liked them. I'll probably not do them if people were like, shut the fuck up, retard. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So that's it. Have a good day, everyone.